Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to this special edition of the Huddle. I'm Rob Toder of the Alliance Review, joined as always by sports editor Mike Brown. And today, a special huddle, we're going to talk about the Northeastern Buckeye Conference, or depending on your point of view, what used to be the Northeastern Buckeye Conference, or what may still be the Northeastern Buckeye Conference. All that's still to be worked out. But Mike, let's recap for our viewers real quickly what has led up to this point now where 7 schools have decided they need to move on.
Well, it all started really a year and a half ago, Rob. They started to have these meetings, and they wanted to keep Louisville as an NBC member, and they wanted to go to a 2-tiered NBC. And they were talking to Dover, New Philly, Orrville before they had joined the league they're in now, and Central Catholic and schools like that were mentioned at that time. This was in the fall of 2014. And when it came time to divvy up the tiers, there were going to be 2 tiers. Dover and New Philly were going to be in the large tier with Louisville, but the problem was none of the other current NBC members wanted to be in the large tier. They all wanted to be in the small tier, away from the Leopards. Well, obviously that ended the talks of that. Well, since then, they have been having meetings. These aren't NBC meetings. These are new league meetings that have been going on for the past year and a half. And it progressed to the point where in December of this year, on December 10th exactly, there was not an exact vote, but I'm told an agreement by the 7 schools. Louisville was not at that meeting, that they would move on and disband and move on with a new league in 2 years, with a new name, new logo, new bylaws, and all that stuff. And then obviously in the last couple weeks, the league has officially announced that that's what they intend to do. So that's pretty much how it's played out.
Yeah, and one thing we want to talk about too is when we mentioned some other schools, Dover, New Philly, Orrville, Central Catholic, a lot of that was not much past the conjecture point. There was some, hey, this school would be a good fit. So and not that there was anything ever in concrete or anything like that.
That's right.
And I think in my experience, in my former job over in Youngstown, covering the Mahoning Valley Conference, then the Metro Athletic Conference, then the All-American Conference when it was formed, and it's a tiered conference. The Inter-Tri-County League, when it was formed, is a tiered league. There's a lot of issues. You think it's a good fit initially, but what I found when those leagues went to tiers was that the smallest school in the top tier or the top enrollment tier was always the first to start looking because they were the smallest school. And I think we kind of see that compressed in the NBC when you look at a school like Salem that has 240 boys compared to Louisville's 348, or West Branch with 228 boys. There's a numbers issue there, and it's a cumulative effect over the years, where now you've got some hurt feelings, I think, and some issues where they don't feel, it's a competitive situation for them. And, there's a lot of hurt feelings now, but I think, as you mentioned, when we were preparing for this, when you take a step back, I think in the long run, it's probably going to work out for everybody.
Right, because I've said it for the last few years, the NBC is not preparing Louisville, especially in football, for the playoffs anymore. And if you look back at how they've fared, say, the last 7 years, I think this past year was their first playoff win in a number of years. And it was just one win and then they were done, even though it was a great game against Hoban. They lost that game. But this league has those 4 schools, or 5 schools really, that are the smallest league members. They have gotten smaller over the last 10 years. Louisville's length that they stay in the playoffs has been lessened. Where back when the NBC, when all these other schools were like D2 and D3, Louisville was better prepared for the playoffs. The league prepared them better, and I don't think it does that now. It hasn't done it for a few years. So, like you said, Rob, I think when they all step back, I know there's a lot of anger on both sides right now. I think when they all step back, I think they're going to see that Louisville is going to be better off wherever it ends up, whether it's going to be as an independent, as a member of an 8-team Federal League, or in the Suburban League, where I think they're a really good fit except for the travel. I think they're going to be a better tested team for the playoffs in all sports, especially football. And I think the NBC obviously is now it's going to be a process for them to find that 8th school, because we found out last time, they're not, even though a lot of people are saying, well, the NBC is not going to be nearly as good. Well, maybe not, but the NBC is still a better league than I would say about 90% of the other leagues in Northeastern Ohio. That's a good football league, and other sports too. I mean, we've had teams win state titles. The West Branch football team won a state title. The West Branch girls basketball team won a state title. Louisville cross country won a state title. Back in the day, Springfield, when they were a member of the NBC, they won softball titles. Marlington won the 1996 softball title. I mean, this is a good league. And I think you don't have a lot of people knocking at the door to get in this league because they know it's a tough league, with or without Louisville. So it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be that 8th member to replace Louisville going forward.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because the immediate schools that are around that kind of fit that footprint, a D3 football, a D2 in basketball. You're talking Southeast, possibly out of Portage County. I don't. And I just throw that name out there. I don't think there's been any indication from anyone that Southeast is interested in leaving the Portage Trail Conference. Right. Possibly a St. Thomas that is a D4 in football or a D5. They kind of waver back and forth, and a D3, D4 in basketball. But they play up in their schedule.
Right.
And I know that kind of intrigues you a lot.
Right.
Crestview and South Range have been rumored out of the ITCL, but I think the ITCL has sort of taken some steps now.
Right.
They're going to be, I think it's going to come out shortly, they're going to be adding a couple of teams. They've already announced 3. I think there's one more that's going to surprise some people, but I think it's pretty set that's going to happen. And so you're looking at maybe a 20-team ITCL. Yeah. And again, we've already talked about how tiers work, and that's a fluid situation. So. Beaver Local is a possibility. East Liverpool, I think, but they've not indicated any real interest in becoming that 8th team. I think there's a little bit there, but not a lot. But is there one good fit in your mind, for that 8th school?
Well, going back to what you were saying, Rob, I know that Beaver Local and Crestview and South Range had come to some of the non-NBC meetings at the last meeting where things got to be pretty serious. Beaver Local didn't come back. South Range didn't come back. Crestview came back but had some questions. So my problem with that is if the league moves further east, say a Crestview becomes a member, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they would, then you risk losing Canton South because of geographics. That would be a long haul from Canton South to Crestview. So I think what's going to happen, I don't think it's going to be an easy fit to find that 8th team, moving forward over the next year or two. I think that's going to be but there's one school, in my opinion, that would solve the problem, and that would be St. Thomas Aquinas. And the reason I say that, St. Thomas is a smaller school, but that's not a problem. They play up in their schedule in the North Coast Conference. They're traveling to Cleveland for half their league games now. And I think they would be a wonderful fit. They're already playing a lot of these schools and a lot of these sports anyway. In their past, they played Alliance in football. They played Marlington in football. They played West Branch in football. They played Minerva in football. They're playing these schools anyway. So I think what's going to happen, it's going to be a process, and it's going to be a long process. I think they're going to come full circle, the league movers and shakers, and say, wow, there's just not a perfect fit. And it may come back to St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, again, I think initially, I think there's some pushback there. Don't ask me why.
But I can tell you why, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, but I think when you think about the geographic, St. Tom would be right in the hub of the NBC. And like I said, they've got nice facilities, and they've got good programs. And they'd be willing to take on, I think, the challenge of playing up because that's what they already do in the North Coast. Now, whether or not it comes to that, right now I would say no. But like I said, I think after this process plays out, and I think it's going to be a lengthy process to find that 8th school, it may come back to a school like St. Thomas Aquinas. And I think St. Tom would be up for something like that if it ever came to be. Yeah. And again, that's pure speculation on my part. That's not anything factual there. That's just me speculating. But I do think it may come down to something like that. Or the other thing that could happen, Rob, if you would see an implosion of another area league that shakes out and you have 1 or 2 teams that have nowhere to go and you have to have league affiliation because you do not want to be an independent, because we've seen how that plays out with Northwest. They were playing football games in Dayton and Columbus, and no AD wants that situation because you're burning the midnight oil to find teams. Yeah. So that could be the other scenario that play in where you might see a team shake out from another league that would be available down the road. But right now, there's none.
Yeah, and to go back to your earlier point about St. Thomas, why there's that pushback, and again, from the Youngstown perspective, there's a lot of resentment for Mooney and Ursuline over in the Youngstown area. Schools have publicly stated as a course of action they will not schedule those schools in any athletic events because of recruiting accusations. Nobody comes forward with anything. Nobody's been penalized, but there's that perception, and I think part of and I want to emphasize, I'm not equating St. Thomas with Cardinal Mooney and Ursuline. I think St. Thomas does things the right way,
They
as
sure
does
do.
Can Central Catholic,
Right.
and I think
Absolutely.
those kids that are going to St. Thomas are going to go there. We're going there regardless.
That's right.
Okay, but I think there's a guilt by association with the parochial schools and the private schools. I think because of the actions of a few, and not mentioning anybody by name, but there's a couple in Akron that sort of come to mind as well. So I think there's some of that, but I think, like you said, if you're a public school official and you're upset with St. Thomas Aquinas, again, guilt by association, they're a parochial school, therefore they recruit. Why are you playing them in football and
Right.
in other sports?
Sure.
If you don't like how they do things, then why are you playing them?
Yeah, sure.
So that argument kind of rings hollow with me as well, and I think they would be a good fit,
Yeah.
maybe even in the short term. But I think they would probably, from a travel standpoint, I think
Yeah.
they'd love the ability to cut their travel budget probably by 2/3.
Right. And plus, I think you keep the league solvent moving forward that way because, if it would be one of these teams from the East, I think you risk losing Canton South. I think that's the next domino that would fall. If you have a St. Tom as the new member in the league, I think you keep Canton South, and I think you keep that league together for a long time.
And to piggyback my own opinion, I think if you go more east, I think you risk losing Marlington and Alliance
That's
as
true,
well too.
and I agree with
because,
that, too.
There's been a lot of conjecture that Alliance and Marlington are somehow behind this whole thing. I can tell you, and Mike would agree that I've talked to both superintendents at Alliance and Marlington, and as have Mike, at length, and there's not the competitive issue. I think we are safe in saying
right.
this.
Yeah.
Alliance and Marlington do not have the issue of competitiveness of the enrollment differences that the smaller schools have had. But there's also the reality that they face that the other 4 or 5
Right.
were leaving,
Yep, and there was nowhere
and
to go.
and there was you can't be left with a 3-team league. So what's the lesser of two evils? It's going with the 5 that are going.
Right.
That you have some familiarity with, and you also have that scheduling already in place. So,
Yep.
I just to throw that out there, and a lot of this, as you said earlier, is just all conjecture too. And I think let's look at Louisville. Where do they go? I think really the two logical things that I can see. One would be an 8-team federal league. My own personal opinion, and I have nothing to base this on, but I think there was some discussion of a 2-tiered federal league because I know Dover and New Philly, as you mentioned earlier, are kind of looking to come north again. I would be surprised if the federal league went back to
I would
to
too.
tiers because it worked. It was so bad
Yep.
in the '90s. I don't know, and I don't know who you blame for that or what the circumstances were. I just know it didn't work out very well. And
Yeah.
it was short lived. So I don't think the federal league schools that went through that are in any hurry to go back to
Right.
that type of
Yeah, I don't
situation.
think
So I
that
think their
happens.
preference would be bring Louisville in as that 8th team and we go. I'm not sure Louisville's looking at that when you're looking at the enrollment differences. Camp McKinley's got 1,500 students compared to Louisville's 400 or so. So I think there's that issue for Louisville. I think the federal league fits from a travel standpoint.
Right.
I think the suburban league fits from a competition
Absolutely.
standpoint, but
Yep.
then your closest school's an hour away.
That's right. Yeah. That's the rub.
Yeah. So they're kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, they really are. And I think in both, Louisville's case and the 7 remaining NBC members or whatever that league is going to be called in 2 years, I think it's going to be a process. I don't think there's a quick fix in this. I just think it's going to take a while to see how it all shakes out. But I do think when it does down the road, I think what's going to become the NBC is going to be, it's probably going to be, there's going to be better competitive balance in that league overall. And I think for Louisville, wherever they end up down the road, it's going to better prepare them for the postseason in all sports. So hopefully, when everybody steps back from this and see how it's going to play out, I think it's going to be better for all concerned. I really do.
Okay, well, make sure you check out the Alliance Review this week. Mike's going to have a column on this very subject and where he thinks things are going to shake out. And remember, it is a process. It's going to take a while to get this all figured out. So Mike and I will be back at future times to talk about this as we learn things, and we'll share them with you. So for Mike Brown, this is Rob Toder. We will talk to you next time.